Hey y'all, it's Jessica with Simply Jessica Marie. I hope you're having a lovely day. Today I'm going to show you how to use Stockshop picture frame images to create beautiful graphics for your website and social media. As a designer, there are a few different design softwares you can use to create graphics, and my two favorite are Illustrator and Photoshop. While I love using Photoshop to edit the colors of my illustrations or to resize images for my blog, I mainly work with Illustrator. So today I'm going to show you how to use Illustrator to overlay your art prints or paintings on top of Stockshop frame photos. And if you tend to work primarily with Photoshop, hopefully this will be a fun new method for you to learn. So go ahead and open Illustrator and select the file that you'll be using for your art print or painting. I've chosen this illustration of a necklace by Stella and Dot for my art print graphic. After you have that open, go to File, New, and then this little document selector will pop up, and I'm going to be choosing a square graphic so I can use it for Instagram. So I'll be sizing it 650 by 650 pixels, and then make sure that your color mode is in RGB since we're working with a web graphic. And then also make sure that your picture is going to have a nice and high resolution so it is beautifully crisp for Instagram. Then select OK. Okay, so now that you have your artboard opened, go back to File, and then this time select Place. And this is when you're going to grab your Stockshop image that you would like to use. So I'm going to choose, let's see, make sure this is the right one. Yep, this is the gold and red picture frame that I want. So I'm just going to click Place, but before I do that, it's important to note that you need to unclick Link so that it embeds this image inside your artboard. Okay, so now go ahead and click Place, and it's importing the artwork. And this might take a moment since Shay's photos are nice and large, which is one of the things that I love most about Stockshop photos, so I can zoom in and crop any really tiny details if I want to for sneak peek images or up close pictures of some of my design files. Okay, so now that the file has been placed, I'm going to zoom out since, as I mentioned, it's nice and big. So to zoom, I'm just clicking Command and then the minus button. So now I can see the full image as well as my artboard, which is outlined here in black. And in order to scale this down, what you're going to do is click Shift and hold that down, and then go to one of the four corners of the image and drag your cursor so that it is a little bit smaller, and that's about a good size, but now it's not centered. So I'm just going to hold my cursor down and drag the file from left to right so that the frame is a bit more centered until I think that it's about centered. Okay, so now I wanted to mention too that the way that I like kind of laying out the format of my picture frame stock images is so that there is a desktop showing on the bottom so it looks realistic, and then also a nice little bit of white space up top so that the image itself doesn't look too crowded or anything. But I also want to make sure that the picture frame itself is still taking up the majority of the image so that you can see your beautiful artwork that we're going to be placing inside. So now that I have it centered and scaled appropriately to my liking, I'm going to zoom back in a little bit so that I can see all the beautiful details up close. And you're about done and ready to place your artwork file, but there is one important thing that I'm going to mention if you're using art prints that have a white background. And what I want you to do is go over to this little tool called the eyedropper tool and select it. And then we're going to go over to probably the best portion of this is going to be the inside of the picture frame and this top corner. I'm just going to click so that it selects the color. It's going to eyedrop the color and select it. And the color from that eyedropper tool is going to show up over here in the little corner called the fill button. So I'm going to double click on the fill, and it will pop up the color that is actually that white. So you can tell it's not completely white. If it was fully white, it would be 0, 0, 0, 0 all the way down. But it's slightly off white, which is important to note since a lot of times when I was first starting out designing my graphics, I would create art prints that were a crisp white background. And while that might look pretty, it's not quite as realistic, and you want to make this photo look as lifelike as possible. So now that we have the actual correct color from Shay's image, all you're going to do is go over to this number and then copy it, and then click OK to exit out of the color tool. And then once you have that color selected, you're actually going to go over to the shape tool and make sure you have rectangle selected. And zoom in a little bit closer on your image. And we're going to drag and create a rectangle that is in the shape of the inside portion of this picture frame. So I like to go up to the top left-hand corner and then just simply drag your cursor down until it reaches the bottom corner of the rectangle. And if you look closely up in the right-hand corner, you can tell that it's not completely straight. So there's a little bit of a tilt to the picture frame. So in order to make sure that this is lined up appropriately and that the picture shows up completely straight, I'm just going to leave a little bit of room to the right of my rectangle so I can straighten things out. So just release and it will create your off-white rectangle. And in order to make sure that it's definitely that off-white color, you can just double click back on the fill button and it'll show you that you do have that white color. So click OK. And then for this purpose, in order to make sure everything's straightened, I'm actually going to go into my stroke, double click on it, and then select a dark color. It doesn't have to be completely black, just something that's going to show us the outline of the frame. And then just click your cursor. And then we're going to zoom out. Don't need this color guide up here right now. And then go up to the corner of your picture frame and then slightly tilt the image with your cursor to make it a little bit straighter. And to check, you can zoom in to see if your rectangle lines up with the outside portion of the picture frame. And this might take a little bit of back and forth to make sure it's completely aligned. But it's important to do so just to make sure that it looks as lifelike as possible. So it looks good in the right two corners, but it's a little bit too far in on the left. So I'm just going to drag the rectangle over a little bit to make sure it's fully filled. And that looks good to me. So I'm going to click off of it, and yep, that looks good. So now I'm going to have you go back and unfill the stroke so that there is no stroke on the outside, but you still have that pretty off-white color on your fill. And then zoom out, and now we're ready to go and grab that art print file that you had open. So click back to your other artboard. And in order to make sure that everything is sized appropriately, what I'm going to have you do is go back to the rectangle tool, and this time you're just going to simply click on your artboard. And a little button will pop up that allows you to type in the width and the height of your rectangle. So this print is an 8 by 10. So I'm going to type that in. If you're doing 11 by 14, you can size it appropriately that way. And then just click OK. And then it comes up as a black fill, so I'm going to actually swap that so that I have just a stroke selected. And then what I'm going to have you do is center this rectangle. So go up to the top toolbar and go to Horizontal Align Center, and then Vertical Align Center. And then you can unclick and go to your Layers panel and make sure that none of your files are locked. So in here you can see that I have my artwork, the illustration, my signature, and then this rectangle with the outline that I just created. If you have a crisp white rectangle in the background of your artwork, make sure and hide that so it doesn't show up and everything is transparent behind your artwork. So now what I'm going to have you do is simply drag your cursor from one corner of your artwork to the other so that it selects all of the files in this layer. So you can see everything is selected, and then you're going to hit Command and 7, and this creates a clip group that is perfectly sized for your artwork. So it wasn't quite as obvious with this file since everything fit inside the 8x10 square, but sometimes I'll have artwork that extends out past the 8x10 if I have florals that are popping in from the outwards corners. And you want to make sure that everything is cropped nice and smooth so that it fits the 8x10. So after you have your clip group, and make sure it's still selected, just hit Command and C to copy this artwork, and then navigate back to your frame file and click Command V to paste it. And you can tell that it does not have a background to it, so it's just my artwork, my signature, and it is sized appropriately. But it is a little bit too big since my file was large, so I need to scale it down again. So remember to hold Shift while you are dragging your cursor. And then once you're done, release Shift to see the actual size. And it's still a little bit too big, but I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to actually align this top corner of my artwork with the corner of the rectangle. And that's what I love about Illustrator and why I prefer using it is you can see the intersect and you can lock them together so that they're perfectly aligned. So now that those two corners are lined up, the corner of my artwork, and then I'm going to hit Shift again and drag my cursor so that it aligns perfectly with the other corner. Okay, and this rectangle that we created, the off-white rectangle, it's not perfectly 8x10, so just make sure that you center your artwork with that file. So I'm just going to scooch it down just a little bit using the downward arrow. And then unclick and take a look at your artwork. You can zoom out and make sure that you like how everything looks. So you can kind of tell it's really, really subtle, but it looks nice and a little bit of a real paper color with this off-white as opposed to a stark white. I'll show you just by drawing a rectangle in stark white what that would look like in comparison. You can kind of tell that it's digitally created if it's a stark white, just for comparison's sake. Okay, so you can kind of tell this is a little bit too bright and white of a color compared to this nice soft white here. All right, so now you have your artwork placed and it looks like it's pretty much ready to go. So all you have to do is save your file. And I like to save it for Illustrator. I'll just type in Stella and Dot necklace art print by Simply Jessica Marie. And I'll go over to my client work folder to file this away. And then select the SE Stockshop tutorial and hit save. Sorry for the spinning pinwheel. I am working with a laptop that needs to be desperately updated. So I'm going to click OK. It doesn't really matter what version. I like to use CS6 since that's the version I'm working with. And then it's going to save this file, and it might take a moment. And while it's saving, I wanted to point out an important fact of why I chose this method. So instead of actually just going in and opening this picture frame file and placing your PDF art print on top of it, the reason why it's important to go in and actually select the original artwork is that oftentimes the file size that you're using for your PDF is going to be much smaller than the file size that we're designing for this graphic. So you want to make sure that it's going to show up and it's going to be crisp and clear, as opposed to a smaller file size that you drag out to be larger, because that's going to show up a little bit too gritty. And then also, of course, if you have your original file with a crisp white background, it's not going to look quite as realistic as using the soft, slightly off-white background. Okay, so this is going to take just a little bit too long, so I'm going to stop it and save it after I finish this tutorial, but I also wanted to mention how I save my files to make sure that they show up nice and crisp for any blog posts or shop listings or something that I post on Instagram. So instead of saving this as back to file and click Save for Web, it's loading the image. And then I'm going to make sure and save this as a PNG file. I like the PNG 24. It's kind of what autofills into the settings. And I prefer these types of files over JPEGs just because the colors appear a bit more bright and crisp than the JPEG files when I am uploading them to Instagram or to Facebook or my blog or my shop. And you can have a preview of what it will look like when it's actually saved. So it's nice and crisp. You can tell where the art print is with this off-white, and your artwork looks beautiful. So click Save, and you can name it however you would like to. As I had mentioned earlier, I prefer naming it with a description of my art print as well as who it was made by, in case anyone is searching for it on Pinterest or Google. It's good to always name your files with nice keywords. So thank you guys for taking the time to watch this tutorial today. I hope it was helpful. As I mentioned, there are other ways to go about creating graphics. You can create them with Photoshop, but I wanted to show you guys an Illustrator version of this tutorial in case anyone else prefers working with Illustrator as I do. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day.